Summer. For most people it means warmth, laughter, long days and endless nights filled with fireflies, the smell of sunscreen, and backyard barbecues. But for some, summer became the season they wish they could forget. Tonight we are going deep into the heat, into the lakes, the campgrounds, the rural roads, and the quiet neighborhoods, where something went terribly, terribly wrong. These are not campfire legends. These are not urban myths. These are real accounts, real people, real terror. I'm your host, and you're listening to The Scary Collector. Turn off your lights, close your windows, and whatever you do, don't go outside. Story 1. The Lake House. Our first story comes from a woman named Renee, now 34 years old, who submitted her account after years of keeping it buried deep inside herself. She says, and I quote, "I've never told anyone the full version of this. Not my husband. Not my therapist. Because every single time I try, I get to a certain part, and I just can't breathe." It happened the summer she turned 19. Renee grew up in a small town in northern Minnesota. The kind of place where every family had a lake cabin, and summer was practically a religion. Her family's cabin sat on the eastern shore of a small, private lake called Teller's Pond. It was off a dirt road, about 12 miles from the nearest gas station. No cell service. No neighbors within shouting distance. Just pine trees, water, and silence. She had been going there every summer since she was a toddler. It was her safe place, her sanctuary. The smell of the aged cedar walls, the sound of loons calling across the water at dusk, those were her happiest memories. That July she went up with 3 friends, her best friend Dana, and 2 guys they'd known since high school. Marcus and a quiet, lanky kid everyone called Birch because of his pale skin and white blonde hair. It was supposed to be a perfect week. Swimming, fishing, bonfires, staying up too late, sleeping in too long. The first 3 days were exactly what they'd hoped for. They swam until their fingers pruned. Marcus caught a massive bass. Dana and Renee stayed up whispering until 3 in the morning, watching the stars from the dock. Birch sat alone sketching in his notebook, as he always did. But on the 4th night, everything changed. Renee woke up around 2 in the morning to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps on the gravel path outside the cabin. She lay completely still, eyes open in the darkness, listening. The footsteps stopped. Then she heard the door handle move. Not turn, just move, like someone was resting their hand on it, feeling it, testing it. She sat bolt upright. From her bed she could see the front door. She stared into the blackness. Nothing happened. After many long minutes she convinced herself it was nothing, just the wood contracting in the cool night air, an overactive imagination. She fell back asleep. The next morning Marcus noticed something that made Renee's blood run cold. On the gravel path beside the cabin, someone had arranged a perfect line of 11 smooth, flat lake stones, leading straight from the tree line to the cabin's front door. Marcus thought it was a prank. Dana thought Marcus had done it. Birch said nothing. He just stared at the stones for a long moment before going back inside. Renee picked them up and threw them into the trees, but the unease had already settled deep in her stomach. That afternoon she went down to the dock alone. The lake was glass still, not a single ripple. She sat with her feet in the water, trying to shake the feeling. Then she saw the rowboat. Their aluminum rowboat, which was always tied to the dock every single night, was now on the far side of the lake, sitting motionless in the reeds. No wind, no current, just sitting there, as if placed deliberately. Marcus swam out and brought it back, laughing, calling it a ghost boat. Renee did not laugh. The fifth night was when everything fell apart. They had a big bonfire, stayed up late, went to bed around midnight. Renee struggled to sleep, listening for footsteps. Around 1 she finally drifted off. She was jolted awake by Dana violently shaking her arm. "Renee! Renee, wake up! Wake up right now!" Dana's voice was barely a breath. Renee turned and looked. There was a man standing at the window. Middle-aged, gaunt, hollow eyes that caught no light. His face pressed against the glass, completely still, just watching. He smiled. Dana screamed. Marcus and Birch came crashing down from the loft. By the time they reached the window, he was gone. They barricaded the door and stayed awake until dawn. At first light they packed and left. But before they drove away, Renee checked beneath the window. There were deep adult footprints, and around them, a careful circle of smooth lake stones. She called the sheriff when she got home. A deputy confirmed the stones and prints. 2 weeks later, a man was arrested at another lake cabin 6 miles away, living in the woods, stealing from empty properties. Renee never returned to the lake house. Not once. She ended her account with these words. "It wasn't the face at the window that destroyed me. It was the stones. Someone had been walking up to that door every single night we were there, and we had no idea." Story 2. The Road Home. The summer of 2011. A stretch of rural highway in central Georgia. A 26-year-old schoolteacher named Adrienne is driving home alone after visiting her parents for the long 4th of July weekend. It is 11:45 p.m. The highway is a long, 2-lane road flanked on both sides by tall, dark Georgia pine forest. No street lights. No houses visible. The nearest town with an open gas station is 31 miles ahead. Adrienne has made this drive dozens of times. She knows every curve. She has her music playing, something upbeat to keep her alert. Full tank of gas. Windows up. She is not worried. At approximately 11:52 p.m. she comes up behind a car moving very slowly, maybe 25 miles per hour in a 55 zone. It's an old model sedan. She can't tell the color in the darkness. No hazard lights. She slows down and follows for about a mile, waiting for the driver to pull over or speed up. They do neither. She decides to pass. She checks her mirror, signals, pulls into the oncoming lane, and accelerates. As she comes alongside the other car, she glances over. The driver's seat is empty. Her heart slams against her ribs. She jerks her eyes forward and floors it past the slow-moving car. In her rearview mirror, the sedan continues rolling forward at the same slow speed, headlights glowing, keeping perfect pace with the dark road. She tells herself someone must be slumped over. A medical emergency. A drunk driver with their foot still on the gas. It has to be that. It has to be. She pulls over onto the shoulder. She waits, watching in her mirror as the other car slowly rolls up behind her and stops. 1 full minute passes. No one gets out. No door opens. No hazard lights. Just that old sedan, idling directly behind her in the pitch-black highway. Adrienne's instincts, the ones every woman develops over a lifetime, began screaming at her. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. She pulls back onto the road and accelerates hard. The sedan follows. Not slowly this time. It matches her speed almost immediately, filling her rearview mirror with its headlights. She pushes up to 75, then 80. The sedan stays right behind her, close enough that she can see it's an older model, rusted around the wheel wells, one headlight slightly dimmer than the other. She drives 90 miles per hour through the dark, completely alone, with that car locked on her tail for 15 straight minutes. Every second feels like forever. Her hands are shaking on the wheel. Her mouth is dry. She keeps glancing in the mirror, praying the lights will disappear. They never do. Finally, a volunteer fire station appears ahead, a small cinderblock building with its bay lights on. She stands on her brakes, turns in so fast she almost rolls the car, and lays on her horn repeatedly. 2 volunteer firefighters come running out. The sedan does not follow her into the lot. It slows as it passes the entrance. In the overhead lights, Adrienne sees the driver clearly for the first time. A man sitting very low, almost horizontal, head barely visible above the door line. He turns and looks directly at her as he passes. Then the car is gone, swallowed back into the darkness. The firefighters called the sheriff. Adrienne gave her statement while shaking so badly that one of the men brought her a blanket despite the humid summer heat. Deputies patrolled the road but found nothing. The sedan was never identified. What they did find, about 4 miles past the fire station, was a blue tote bag on the shoulder. Inside were a length of rope, a roll of duct tape, and a pair of latex gloves. Adrienne never drove that road at night again. Story 3. The Campsite Neighbor. This account comes from Trevor, 31 years old at the time. He went on a solo camping trip deep into a national forest in the Pacific Northwest, a trail he had hiked several times before, 8 miles into the backcountry. He set up camp on the second evening beside a small creek in a flat clearing. It was beautiful, quiet, isolated. Exactly what he wanted. He hadn't seen another hiker all day. He ate dinner as the sun went down, fed his fire, and was preparing to get into his tent around 9 p.m. when he noticed a light flickering through the trees, about 150 yards away. Another campfire. He wasn't thrilled, but he wasn't alarmed either. He went to bed. Sometime around 2 in the morning he woke up. Something had pulled him from sleep. The forest was quiet except for the creek. Then he heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling his tent. Pine needles crunching with every step. The person made a full circle, then stopped right at the tent door. He lay there barely breathing. He heard low, slow breathing just inches away on the other side of the thin nylon. Then a quiet, almost gentle voice whispered, "I know you're awake." Trevor said his mind went blank with pure animal terror. He was 8 miles from any other human, completely alone. He forced himself to move, grabbed his knife, unzipped the tent, and burst out. No one was there. In the morning he found large boot prints in the soft dirt. He packed up in minutes and hiked out. On the way down he checked the other campsite. He found a cold fire ring, items stolen from multiple hikers, and chart pages from different journals spanning years. Some of those items belonged to people who had gone missing in that forest. The cases remain unsolved. Story 4. The Neighborhood Watch. Not all horror happens in the woods. Sometimes it lives right next door, in a quiet suburban street where everyone waves and smiles, where kids ride bicycles and ice cream trucks play their cheerful tunes in the distance. This story comes from a woman named Priya. In the summer of 2016, she moved with her husband and their 7-year-old daughter into a peaceful neighborhood in central Ohio. They were the only Indian American family on the block. At first, everything seemed perfect. Neighbors brought over warm casseroles and homemade cookies. Children invited their daughter to play. The street had that classic American summer feel. Sprinklers hissing on green lawns, the smell of freshly cut grass, laughter echoing between houses. But there was one man who stood out. He lived alone in the beige house directly across the street. Early 60s, gray hair, always wearing the same faded polo shirts. He was constantly outside, sitting on his porch for hours, standing at the edge of his driveway, or slowly pacing along the sidewalk in front of his house. Always watching. At first Priya tried to convince herself he was just the neighborhood watch type. The kind of older man who knows everyone's routine. But within a few days she realized something chilling. He wasn't watching the street. He wasn't watching the neighborhood. He was watching her house. Specifically her house. Every time she stepped outside to check the mailbox, he was there, staring. When her daughter played in the front yard, he stood motionless, eyes fixed on the little girl. When Priya pulled weeds in the garden on hot summer afternoons, she could feel his gaze burning into her back. If she went inside for 20 minutes and came back out, he would still be in the exact same position, as if he had not moved at all, as if he was waiting for her. Her husband dismissed it at first. "He's just a lonely old man," he said. "He's probably been sitting on that porch for 20 years. But Priya trusted her instincts. She started keeping a secret log, dates, times, exactly what the man was doing, how long he stared, what she was doing when he watched. She wrote everything down quietly, not wanting to escalate the situation. Then the gifts began appearing. Small things at first. A single dead bird placed carefully on the front step. A rock with a strange symbol painted on it in white, left at the base of the mailbox. A torn piece of newspaper, an article about a devastating house fire, wedged into the welcome mat. She couldn't prove the man was responsible, but every single time she found something disturbing in her yard, he was already standing at the end of his driveway when she stepped outside in the morning, waiting, watching her reaction. The phone calls started next. Blocked number. No voice on the other end, just slow, heavy breathing, then a click. 3 times in 1 week, always in the evening when her husband was still at work and her daughter was playing nearby. Priya finally called the non-emergency police line. When she gave the man's address, the officer on the phone went silent for a long moment. He asked her to come into the station. There she learned the disturbing truth. The man had a history. 2 previous harassment complaints from women on different streets. A restraining order that had expired. And one case, charges eventually dropped, where a female tenant claimed he had installed a hidden camera in her bathroom vent. The police advised her to keep documenting everything and to call immediately if anything got worse. 2 weeks later, her husband, now fully convinced, installed a complete camera security system around their home. On the second night after the cameras were installed, the footage showed something that made Priya's blood freeze. Between 2 and 3 a.m., the man walked slowly across the street in complete darkness. He stood on the sidewalk directly in front of their house for 40 full minutes, completely still, just staring at their windows. He never approached the door. He never touched anything. He simply stood there, watching, then turned and walked back to his house. They filed a formal complaint. The man was interviewed. He claimed he was sleepwalking. He said the camera footage was unclear. He was not charged. Priya, her husband, and their daughter moved out within 60 days. They sold the house at a significant financial loss just to escape. Later, through a neighborhood social media group, Priya learned that the new family who moved in experienced almost identical harassment within their first month. The man still lives in that same beige house across the street. He is still watching. Story 5. Under the water. There is something about open water that has always unsettled people on a primal level. We cannot see beneath it. We do not know what is down there, waiting in the dark. This account comes from a man named Joel. He was 22 years old that summer. He and a group of college friends had rented a pontoon boat for a full day on a large reservoir in rural Tennessee. The reservoir was man-made, created in the 1950s when a dam flooded an entire valley. An old farming community had been wiped out. Roads, fields, churches, and homes all submerged beneath the dark green water. Locals still talked about the old church steeple that used to be visible at low water levels, and how sonar scans showed rectangular shapes deep below, the outlines of forgotten buildings. Kids dared each other to swim down and touch old road signs still standing on drowned streets. It was a hot summer day. The water was warm near the surface but ice-cold below. Visibility dropped to almost nothing after just 4 or 5 feet. Joel and his friends anchored the pontoon in a quiet cove about a quarter-mile from shore. Most of them swam and floated lazily near the boat. But Carson, an experienced diver, had brought his mask and snorkel. He kept making relaxed dives along the anchor line, going down 10, 12, sometimes 15 feet before coming back up. After about an hour, Carson surfaced from a dive and grabbed the side of the pontoon. His face was deathly pale beneath his tan. "Get out of the water," he said urgently but quietly. "Everyone get out right now. Don't splash. Just get out." Only when everyone was safely back on the boat and they had started motoring toward the dock did Carson finally speak. His voice was still shaking. On his last dive he had gone a little deeper than usual, following the anchor line down into the gloom. At the edge of his visibility, he saw what looked like the roof of an old submerged farmhouse covered in algae. But there was something standing on the roof. A human-shaped figure. Vertical. Completely still, yet somehow shifting slightly. Not floating with the current, but standing upright on the roof 60 feet underwater. Arms hanging loosely at its sides. It was looking up, directly toward Carson. He described the face as something he still cannot fully put into words. It did not look like a drowning victim. It looked aware. It looked deliberate. It looked wrong. They reported it immediately when they reached the marina. The next morning a sheriff's dive team searched the cove. They found the old farmhouse exactly where Carson described. Tied to the chimney was a nylon rope leading down into the collapsed interior. At the end of the rope was a diver's weight belt, the kind used to stay submerged. There was no body, no diving equipment except the weight belt. No explanation whatsoever for what Carson had seen. To this day, Joel says none of them swim in deep water anymore. Even in clear pools they feel uneasy, because somewhere in that reservoir, something is still standing on rooftops, looking up toward the surface, waiting. Story 6. The Farm Road. A woman named Sasha, a paramedic from rural Iowa, sent us this account with a note that said simply, "I am a rational person. I have seen things in my line of work that most people never see. I do not spook easily. I want that to be clear before you read this." It was the summer of 2018. She was working a rural ambulance route with her partner Doug when they were dispatched to a welfare check on a remote farm. An elderly woman named Eleanor Vass, 78 years old, lived alone on the property. A neighbor had called after noticing she hadn't collected her mail in 4 days. The farm was at the end of a long dirt road, 2 miles off the county highway. Cornfields stretched chest-high on both sides, swaying gently in the hot summer breeze. No other structures were visible in any direction. Just endless green and the burning sun overhead. When they pulled up to the old white farmhouse, everything looked normal at first. Well-kept yard. Ancient pickup truck in the driveway. A vegetable garden that had recently been watered. They knocked on the door. No answer. They announced themselves loudly and knocked again. The door swung open on its own. It hadn't been fully latched. Inside, the house was eerily neat and clean. A cup of tea sat on the kitchen table, long since gone cold. A library book lay face down on the arm of a chair. They searched every room carefully. Nothing appeared disturbed. No signs of a struggle. But Eleanor was nowhere to be found. Out back they checked the large hay barn first. Empty. Just dust and the smell of old hay. Then they moved to the smaller equipment shed. It was padlocked from the outside with a heavy, newer lock. Something about that padlock felt deeply wrong to Sasha. Sheds get locked, but this one felt different. They called for a sheriff's deputy. When he arrived with bolt cutters, they opened the shed. Eleanor Vass was inside. She was alive, but barely. Dehydrated, malnourished, suffering from severe heat exhaustion after 4 days locked in that metal shed during a scorching Iowa summer. She sat in the corner with her knees drawn up, eyes open but distant. She wouldn't speak. She just kept pointing at the wall with a trembling finger. Scratched into the old wooden wall, over and over in deep, overlapping, frantic lines, were the same 4 words. He comes back nightly. When Eleanor finally recovered enough to speak, she told investigators a fragmented story. A man had appeared one evening claiming his car had broken down. She let him use her phone. After that, her memory had large gaps. She remembered waking up inside the locked shed. Every night she heard the farmhouse door open and close. She heard footsteps moving through her home directly above her. She could see the roof from where she lay trapped. Someone was living in her house while she slowly suffered in the shed. The man was never identified. No fingerprints matched. Eleanor passed away 14 months later, never fully regaining her memory of those 4 days. The case remains open. Story 7. Help Me. This story is shorter in events, but perhaps the most disturbing of all, because it reveals how easily we can be trained to ignore our own instincts. A woman named Gwen, 29 years old, a nurse living in a mid-sized city in the American South, was jogging through her neighborhood early one July morning. It was just after 6 a.m. The air was already hot and heavy. She ran this same route 3 or 4 times a week. She knew every street, every house, every park. As she passed a small neighborhood park with a playground and walking paths, she heard a child crying. Not loud hysterical crying, but a steady, exhausted, hopeless kind of crying. The sound of a child who had been crying for a long time. In the middle of the playground, standing beside the swings, was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. No adult was visible anywhere. Gwen's first instinct was to go to her immediately. She was already moving toward the playground gate when a man stepped out from the shadow of a large oak tree. He was tall, probably in his 40s, dressed too warmly for the summer heat. He smiled at Gwen and gave a friendly wave. The kind that says, "I've got this. We're fine, don't worry." The gesture of an embarrassed parent. The little girl looked up at the man and stopped crying instantly. Not with relief. Not with joy at seeing a parent. She simply went completely still. Mouth closed. Body frozen. Gwen stood at the gate for several long seconds. The man placed his hand on the little girl's shoulder and began steering her away, casual and unhurried. The girl looked back at Gwen with an expression she would never forget. It wasn't the look of a child seeing a stranger. It was the look of someone silently begging for help, pleading with her eyes not to walk away. A desperate please look. Gwen's rational mind took over. "It's fine," she told herself. She stopped crying. He's clearly the parent. You don't want to embarrass him or cause a scene. So she continued her jog. She made it half a mile before something deep inside her, something below thought, forced her to turn around and run back as fast as she could. When she reached the park, the man and the girl were gone. She called 911 immediately. Officers responded quickly and searched the area. They found the man 4 blocks away, walking fast, alone. No child with him. When questioned, he claimed he knew nothing about any little girl. The girl was eventually found hiding inside a plastic tube slide at a smaller playground 2 streets over. She was unharmed physically but terrified. She told officers the man had threatened to hurt her dog if she screamed. He knew her dog's name. She had never seen him before. The man was arrested and later convicted. At the trial, Gwen testified. When the prosecutor asked what made her turn back, she said, "The way the little girl looked at me. I've seen that look before as a nurse, in patients who are terrified but can't speak. It was a please look, not a goodbye look. A please. Trust that look. Whenever you see it, trust it." Story 8. The Last Summer. We end with perhaps the strangest account in our collection. This one was submitted anonymously. We have verified enough to know it is real, but we leave it to you to decide what you believe. The submitter, who we will call Ray, was 12 years old in the mid-1990s. Their family rented a beautiful old beach cottage on a small barrier island off the coast of South Carolina. The island was quiet, accessible only by a short ferry ride. The cottage sat at the end of a gravel lane, the last house before the dunes and the endless beach. The first few days were perfect. Salt air, waves, seashells, and family time. But by Wednesday, Ray's mother began feeling strange. Not sick exactly, but a constant feeling of being watched. Like something was wrong with the air inside the house itself. Ray's father dismissed it as dehydration or vacation nerves. By Thursday, Ray's mother refused to leave the bedroom. While his father tried to help her and his older sister stayed with her, young Ray wandered into the small garage attached to the cottage. Among old beach chairs and forgotten items, he found a cardboard box hidden on a back shelf. Inside were dozens of photographs, Polaroids and drugstore prints spanning many years. All of them showed families inside the same cottage, eating, playing, sleeping. Happy vacation memories. But at the bottom of the box were different photos. Taken at night with flash. Families sleeping. A woman sitting alone in the kitchen in the dark. All taken from outside, through windows. Many different families over many years. Ray brought the box to his father. His father went pale. They called the rental agency. Police were brought in. In the crawl space beneath the cottage they found a sleeping mat, canned food, a bucket, and a peephole drilled directly up into the master bedroom floor where Ray's parents had been sleeping. No one was ever caught. The owner claimed ignorance. Ray's family left immediately. His mother recovered once they were gone, but she never forgot the feeling. Ray is now in his early 40s with children of his own. Every summer at the beach he checks crawl spaces and peepholes. He closes every blind before dark. Because some things that feel like they're watching you from the outside are already inside the house.